Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. Welcome to Coping with COVID versus Creativity in Crisis. This event is hosted by Educate a Child, a global program of the Education Above All Foundation. I am your moderator today, if I can remember to stay off of mute, for the event. I am the technical head for West Africa and Asia with Educate a Child. We would like to welcome some opening remarks from Education Above All's CEO, Mr. Fahad Al-Sitani.
Good afternoon, everyone, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Education Above All Foundation High-Level Political Forum side event, Coping with COVID versus Creativity in Crisis. Education Above All Foundation is a global education foundation that was established in 2012 under the leadership of Her Highness Sheikh Moazza bint Nasser. We believe that education is the single most effective means of reducing poverty, generating economic growth, and creating peaceful and just societies. Education is a fundamental right for all children and initial conditions to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Today, virtual discussion hosted by our Educate a Child program will discuss how the COVID-19 forced further inequality on the most vulnerable children and how it also encouraged real resilience and creativity in the face of huge challenges. According to UNESCO, the situation remains bleak unless urgent action is taken today. Over 24 billion children and youth are at risk of dropping out of school. Educate a Child and its partners have established that a global crisis have also served as a support for creativity. With the thanks to the cooperation of our partners here today, this event efforts us the opportunity to share with you the experience and lesson learned in keeping children learning during the ongoing pandemic COVID-19. Thank you so much and wishing you all the best on our event together.
Thank you, Fahad, and thank you all for joining us again. When the closure of schools across the globe forced over 1 billion children out of school, the issue of out-of-school children and children not learning gained global attention. But this attention was largely focused on those children who had already had access and the means and opportunity to participate and receive an education. What the over 59 million children who were previously out of school prior to the pandemic were facing was largely out of the public's view. School doors being shuttered continued to force these children to not have the opportunity or access to learn. Our partners are those who, in Educate a Child, are uniquely focused on these children. Today, we'll hear from 4 of Educate a Child's partners on the ways that they have continued to get and keep children learning when school doors were shuttered. We will look at different aspects of what it took to ensure that these children continued to learn and that they had access and opportunity to learn during the pandemic and beyond. We will look at distance education during in low and no tech areas. We'll look at the role that parents play, the role that communities play, and the role that teachers play. I think I actually reversed 2 of those, but that's okay. We are joined today by Dr. Tariq Chima of Allied, the country director for Pakistan, Mrs. Roseanne Jager, the head of or chief operating officer for Build On US, Mr. Saeed Aman, Dr. Saeed Aman, I'm sorry, Ethiopian country director for Imagine One Day, and Mr. Thithanan from UWS, Cambodia, all partners of Educate a Child. To begin with, we'll start to look at distance education in low and no tech areas. As schools shut and we started to focus on how to deliver education, much of those solutions were technology-based. But our partners look at the most marginalized children, and often they're the ones without access to high-tech solutions. So I invite Dr. Chima to talk to us a bit and tell us what his organization, Alight, has been doing in Pakistan to address this situation. Dr. Chima.
Hello, and very good morning to you all. Thank you, Dr. Hervey, United Nations High-Level Political Forum, and our esteemed partner, Education Above All. We are delighted to share a story from Pakistan. About 3 years back, we have embarked on country's most ambitious out-of-school children program under Educate a Child and in partnership with Education Above All. We aim to enroll and retain 1 million out-of-school children across Pakistan, and we rolled out this program early 2018, and towards late 2019 and early 2020, we have reached the mark of 800,000, which was a big achievement. And that is the time when we have come to the pandemic situation. And next slide. So at that point, I think the level of alert for us was immensely high, because all of these children that we have been enrolling coming from the communities who could not afford formal schooling, who could not had any connectivity, as well as any access to other equipments. So we were forced to look into the possible way where we say, even if schooling is not going on, how can we sustain the learning process for them? So this is how we start thinking about what could be the affordable strategy, what could be low cost, high impact strategy. And the idea came up was that what if we reach those children through radio? And this is how we started this new initiative, but an old technology. Next slide. If you look at the program, it has been a very interesting program. Over the years, we were able to, identify, enroll, and retain out-of-school children. And unfortunately, Pakistan stands second in the number of out-of-school children. Over 20 million children from age 6 to 16 have no access to education. We created a very wide, broad spectrum partnership, both with the governmental, non-governmental, and international donors. One of the most amazing things that we were able to see was that we had 46% girls out of the, all the kids that we have enrolled. And I would say, if anyone asked me what is the secret, and secret is that we have taken a very human-centered approach. We were looking at how the girls live in a communities. They don't want to walk far from their homes. They don't want to go to the teachers if they are males. They also sometimes are busy helping in their house chores in the morning hours. So we introduced flexi hours. So this is how we were able to provide more flexible opportunity and schedules for the girls to get their education. Next slide. And next, please. So I believe that COVID, of course, which has obstructed the learning, across the world, has also offered us a unique opportunity where we can think out of box and look for the solutions. And I believe that not only the radio and other means, the whole distance learning is now going to be the new norm, and this is going to immensely raise our resilience towards pandemic, but more importantly, we will now be able to reach millions of more children who would have been difficult to reach otherwise. Next slide. So this is where all the fun started. Back in early 2020, we put together our program team, and we said, okay, let's find a way. And now, interestingly, when we launched this program, this whole radio programming was not a part of that. So we have to start something on urgent basis, and we were grateful for the support and motivation of the Education Above All, that they allowed us to venture into something interesting and see if that works, and how can we make sure that millions of those children who are in Pakistan, and they are at the risk of being dropped out. Not only the one we have enrolled, but also the children who were going to formal schooling were now facing the risk of being dropped out because schools were closed. Initially, we put together a very small team of educationists and program execution people, and we decided that we will come up with a student learning outcome-based program for grade 1 to 3 in phase 1, and then grade 4 to 5 in phase 2. So we were able to develop 30 sessions for grade 1 to 3, which were later was pilot tested in Gilgit and Baltistan. The good thing of a program as such was that it was as relevant to the non-formal education students, but also for the formal education students, because it was helping them to strengthen their knowledge and learn their concepts better. So we felt like that this program turned out to be a remedial for many more kids who were not originally focused by us, but they were part of the formal education. So once we tried that, we have hired the airtime in Gilgit-Baltistan in collaboration with the provincial Department of Education. We took airtime both on medium wave. We also got on FM radios, and we started this program. We were broadcasting the same session twice a day, morning and evening. We also went for a radio advertisement campaign. So we were actually running small ads for people to know that their school will be starting, and they can put their kids into it. Another thing that was very interesting, that we had a good network of the literacy mobilizers as well as teachers. So we make them that they will be going around their communities, reach out to the children that they used to teach, and encourage the communities to gather small number of children, because let's not forget that we were having pandemic going on, and we have to make sure that there's a social distancing. Yet we were able to make what we call as a small community learning circles. With those circles, we were able to get together 15, 20 students together, and they will go over these programs. The next big challenge, other than accessibility, was how are we going to assess what is the level of their learning through radio program. We did simultaneously another pilot creating small workbooks and assessment books, and make sure that the kids can go through that process. And this way we will know they are learning. And the results were quite encouraging. And then once we had successfully launched this program in Gilgit and Baltistan, we were amazed that the federal government of Pakistan and the Ministry of Federal Education has decided to further invest in this program, and they took it nationwide. So the program in last 1 year has been broadcasted 3 times across Pakistan, and I think which is big success, because we were able to reach not only the 20,000 children we were originally aiming to reach out in Gilgit-Baltistan, but it has gone maybe 10 plus million kids who were able to listen to that. We have made that program available as an open source on YouTube. Next slide, please. So what is next? Of course, we cannot underestimate and undermine the importance of internet and the other education technologies that are fast growing, but we should still believe that not every old technology is necessarily an obsolete technology. I think we can invest more into it. We can make our programming more interactive, more interesting. Our next goal is to translate this radio program from grade 1 to 3 and 4 to 5 into regional languages. And then we can also develop some animated sessions of the same SLO base, because this is going to remain the same. No matter how many years pass, the concepts will remain the same. So can we create those programs that can be further run on smartphone and tablets? Next slide, please. We are envisioning now that it is the time to create a distance learning ecosystem. And it becomes even more important when we are talking about non-formal students. And those are the children which makes bulk of the out-of-school children, not only in Pakistan, but other places as well. And if formal education system is sufficient enough, then we would never had that many out-of-school children at first place. So we are compelled to look for alternative solutions, alternative routes, and pathways to see how we can make sure that the learning continues. Doesn't matter if you have a school in your area, whether you have a teacher or not. Even in that situation, when there is no school and no teachers available or no books are available, this is not justifiable to let a child go in his life without education. Hence, we are eager and committed together, along with education above all, to look for all those means. So our whole ecosystem is pretty much, which you can see on this slide, that we have to develop digital content, then maybe tech platform, and teacher training is extremely important. And I would say even the role of parents have become more important today, as they should also know some basics of teaching, because before they will leave it everything upon the teachers and send their child to school and feel free of the responsibilities. But now it is that they have to get involved and learn the basics of how learning dynamics work out. So this is where we are. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tariq. And I think your point on old technologies, not especially radio and paper and pencil, not being obsolete is extremely important for us to remember, particularly as we look to ensure that every child has the opportunity for an education. In your closing points on looking towards the roles of other members of the education community and the greater community, with that, I will invite Roseanne Jager from Build On to talk to us about what Build On does to ensure that the community is engaged in the greater community's role in keeping children learning, particularly during this time of the pandemic, but also how Build On has this is a big part of what Build On does, is community engagement. And so how Build On does that and how the community really helps to ensure education for out-of-school children.
All right, thank you very much, Sabrina. It's really an honor for me to be here today at the invitation of Educate a Child. We at Build On are very grateful for this really amazing partnership to build schools, and we have partnered with EAC to bring more than 50,000 children who are not in school back into the classroom. And so we're really grateful, as I said, for that partnership. And we now have a new goal to bring more than 159,000 children back to school. And of course, we are doing that while the pandemic continues. And as has already been said, we know that the global pandemic has really exacerbated inequity across the globe, and it's made it even more important for us to continue the work. With more and more out-of-school children, we are at a crossroads, and it's extremely important that we partner with our communities to help bring those children back to school. So if you move to the next slide, at Build On, we're working with communities in Malawi, Mali, Senegal, Burkina Faso, Guatemala, Haiti, Nepal, and Nicaragua. And as you can see on the slide here, there are more than 3.7 million children in those countries that do not have a proper seat in a classroom. Next slide, please. And you can see here that one of our flagship program that we started off with at Build On is to work in partnership with rural communities to build schools. And we are very pleased that we have built more than 1,900 schools in partnership with those communities. And on the next slide, you can see two beautiful girls here from Senegal. We have more than 158,000 children who are attending those schools every day. And that brings me to my next slide. I'd like to share with you, I told you a little bit earlier that we brought more than 55,000 children back to school during our first partnership with Educate a Child. And I've shared a lot of metrics with all of you so far. Almost 2,000 schools, over 258,000 children. And now you see this number on the screen, more than 55,000. And I just want to share a quick story with you about the boy in the slide. His name is Cherno. And I'm just going to tell you the one story. Of course, there are 55,479 other stories, but I only have 7 minutes, so I can just share the one with all of you. In 2016, our Build On team in Senegal received a request from a rural community called Jajaktak. This is a community that is very hard to get to. And our team went out there to visit the community to see if they were ready to build a school in partnership with Build On. This community had been advocating for many, many years, even to establish a school with the Ministry of Education. And we finally agreed after they showed that they were ready to work with us that we would build a school there. And while the community was busy building the school, at the same time, the community leaders determined every single child who was out of school. And during that time, they realized that there was an 11-year-old boy that you can see in this picture. His name is Cherno, and he is from the Serer ethnic group in Senegal. And it's the custom in that ethnic group for the youngest boy to be the shepherd. So instead of attending school, Cherno was out tending to the family's cattle. But by working with the community first to build the school and working to really strengthen the capacity of the local leaders to go out and identify the out of school children, and then to actually go speak with Cherno's father to ensure that they would come back to school. And this doesn't happen very quickly. Of course, I said it very quickly, but it doesn't happen very quickly. And after some time meeting with Cherno's father, he finally understood the importance of education. And again, it was the community leaders who met with him and not the Build On staff. So in 2016, Cherno's family decided to bring him back to school, and we operate an accelerated learning program, and again, in partnership with EAC. He went through that program and really did amazing. He started in grade 2 in 2016, and he quickly rose to the top of his class. And he is still in school. This October, he'll be starting in the 8th grade. And every single year since he has been back to school, he has been in the top 1 or 2 positions of his class. And I wanted to share this story because it is extremely important for us to understand that those children, the 55,000 children plus, have real stories, and these are young people who grow up to change their communities, and I'm quite certain Cherno will be one of them. So let's go to the next slide, please. And this is a really important part of Build On methodology. These are women in Senegal, and our women have contributed, or well, our men and women have contributed almost 3.5 million volunteer work days in order to build the school. So as you can see from this picture, the women are working alongside the men to build the schools, and they will also be more likely to bring their children back to school, just like Cherno. Okay, on the next slide. All right, and so I want to tell you the key pieces of our methodology for how we really partner and we put the community at the center of the development. So before we build a school, we engage every single adult member of the community to come together and understand the methodology, and then every single person signs a covenant in order to build the school. All the men, women, aunts, uncles, grandparents, even those who do not yet have children, they sign their agreement to build the school. And in that agreement, they are agreeing to support the school, but then also to send every child back to school. Even if the person is not literate, they will sign with a fingerprint. The community also contributes all of the local materials. So that could be sand, gravel, water. Sometimes it is bricks. They provide the leadership for the school. So I told you about the community leaders in Jajak Talk that helped to bring Cherno back to school. We have the same in every single one of our village, where there are 6 men and 6 women who lead the construction project, but then they also help to identify every single children who is out of school and then make a plan to bring them back to school. You saw from the previous slide that we have, our community members have contributed more than 3.4 million volunteer work days. So all of the parents are building the schools, physically digging the foundation. And they're not just laying the foundation for the structure, but they're laying the foundation for the education and for the development of their children and their communities. They contribute all of the land. And then a really important piece in the covenant that the community members sign is that they agree to send every child back to school. So not just their own children, but they are agreeing to work as a community to bring every child in that community back to school. So I think the colleague before me talked about how important it is to sometimes look at not the most sophisticated technology. And for us, it is the same. We keep the same methodology and we want to be disciplined in that methodology. And so during the, at the start of the pandemic, we knew that this is what makes Build On special. And we are not Build On without these key pieces of our methodology. And so we had to be creative as we move forward during the pandemic in order to keep those pieces of our methodology, because that is exactly why the children are coming back to school and staying in school. And as I mentioned, we have an even larger goal to bring even more back to school. So we'll talk about some of the adjustments to our methodology. On the next slide, please. Okay, so you can see, you may notice a difference of the picture on the left and the picture I showed you with all of the women standing together. There were tons of people in the background. We wanted to make sure that our community members were still participating in the construction of the school, but we had to limit the number of people who were building the school. So we had people work in different shifts, and some of our schools took a little bit longer to build, but we knew that that was okay because we wanted to keep people safe, but we still wanted to keep people out and committed to the project. Now, on the right-hand side, I told you about the covenant. Now, normally, if you're at a Build On ceremony, we are signing the covenant, and we do this before we build every school. Everybody comes together in large groups, but we had to socially distance folks. And then let's go to the next slide quickly. Okay, yes, thank you. The next slide, what I wanted to just tell you is that we did bring our communities together to use our same methodology to do 40,000 masks, and the communities use those masks. Well, they made the masks, what made them more likely to use the masks. And you can see community members are using them on the work site and also in the classroom. And so in conclusion, I just wanted to tell you all how important it was for us to be creative and innovative, but stick to our methodology and be disciplined in that approach and pivot where we can to continue our work. Thank you.
Thank you, Roseanne. I think it's so interesting. And of course, we'll get more into this as we come into the discussion part of our event today. I just want to touch on something that you brought up that is so important for us to remember. And it's that Build On has not just reached 55,480 out of school children, and that there's not just 59 plus million out of school children prior to the pandemic, but each one of those children have an individual story to tell, and that it's individual children with a life and story that we're trying to affect change in and to ensure that they have an education, as well as the point that you really made about, well, we need to get creative and think of new ways of working and solutions. We have to stay true to our principles and methodologies, because that's really what we've built off of and see that works in reaching the most marginalized. So thank you for really bringing that up. And as Dr. Chima had mentioned, the role of parents, and Roseanne has also pointed this out, has been changing through as the pandemic increased and as children were pushed out of school, but also in trying to help get children who were already out of school into education. So I'd like to invite our colleague, Dr. Saeed Yamin from Imagine One Day, Ethiopia, to join us and tell us a little bit about what Imagine One Day has been doing to work with parents and to define the role of parents in ensuring the education of out-of-school children and to keep children learning during this period.
Thank you, Sabrina. Hello, everyone. My name is Said. I'm based in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. First of all, I would like to say thank you to EAA for organizing this panel discussion. My presentation will be focusing on the role of parents, particularly during COVID, and what should be the role of parents post-COVID-19. Next slide, please. To give you a little bit background about Imagine One Day, we are a Canadian NGO operating exclusively in Ethiopia. We have a holistic education program, both formal and non-formal education. We do implement formal education programs in areas where there is no conflict, and non-formal education program mostly in emergency affected communities. In terms of our program, we do have school constructions, which is including K to 12, as well as temporary learning classroom construction in emergency setting. And we do also create conducive learning environment in schools. For example, constructing gender segregated latrines, bringing school wash, including water to school compounds, creating playground materials and provision of teaching and learning materials for schools. And we do also train teachers and PTAs and local governments to enhance local implementation capacity. And we also engage community, and we do also facilitate community outreach. And the purpose of this is particularly when it comes to our school constructions, communities do contribute 10 to 20% in cash and labor and material as well. And the purpose of that is to create community sense of ownership and to strengthen community school partnership. And we do also train local leaders, including religious leaders, clan leaders, parents and children, women and youth associations to support children's learning. Particularly in our partnership with EAC, we use community leaders to help us identify out-of-school children and enroll them and help them to complete primary school. We do also bring school income generation activities into schools so that the schools can be self-sustaining and continue some of the program activities with which we have supported them. Next slide, please. Currently, we are operating in 3 regions, in Oromia, Tigray, and SNNPR, supporting over 946 schools and over 500,000 children. Next slide. Next slide, please. Our partnership with ESA is since October 2013, and we have already implemented 2 projects successfully and completed them. In these 2 projects, we have reached 363 schools in 7 districts of Tigray and Oromia. And as the result of that, we have enrolled 93,488 out-of-school children who had never been to school. These kids had been, the hardest to reach children and children in the pastoralist communities who had been always mostly looking after cattle or occupied with household chore or have many barriers to their education. And currently we have 1 active project with EAC targeting to enroll 63,428 out-of-school children in 431 communities. Next slide, please. When it comes to COVID-19, COVID affected 26 million school-age children, in March when it was declared as a pandemic because schools nationwide were closed. And, none of us were really prepared, including government, were prepared to respond to this. So it took us to turn around and come up with some ideas to continue learning for children. So during the school closure, what we did was we organized community outreach programs to create awareness about COVID-19 and child protection initially, because that was first priority for the government as well as for us, as there wasn't enough awareness about it. And then we provided personal protective equipment and hygiene kits to the communities so that the children and their families are safe. And then we followed up with home-based learning using low-cost technology that was mentioned by Tariq and Rosan earlier, like we used the radio programs, because only 2% of the schools in Ethiopia at that time were, with internet connectivity. So we had to go for low-cost technology. And we produced comprehensive and interactive radio lessons for primary grades with COVID-19 messaging in collaboration with Oromia Education Bureau that reached over 9 million school-age children who were out of school because of the pandemic. And the great thing that we are really proud of was what we did with the parents, because teachers were not supporting the kids through home-based learning. And most of the parents in our context are illiterate, and helping them was so crucial to ensure that these children continue to learn during the school closure. So what we did was we oriented parents on how they can support their children's learning continuity through this low-cost technology. So we oriented them, what the program offers and what they can contribute in terms of encouraging their children to follow the program, and all themselves participating in the program and encouraging the kids to attend the program, and working with their children on the assignments that are given through this home-based learning programs, and also communicating with teachers and reporting the progress that the kids are making in terms of their learning. So that was highly successful compared to other programs that were just radio programs where parents are not fully engaged. And after the schools were reopened in November 2020, we sensitized PTAs and community leaders and the school community on COVID-19 and safe school reopening protocol. And we organized community-led go back to school campaigns. Yet, there were many, school-age children who were never returned back to school. So we had to conduct several go back to school campaigns. And we trained teachers on psychosocial support and socio-emotional learning. And we had to also create temporary classrooms because according to the new COVID-19 protocol, only 25 kids can sit in the classroom compared to 50 students before the COVID. So new classrooms were required, and we had to support communities and mobilize the communities to create new temporary classrooms, as well as bringing wash facilities, including like low-cost food-operated hand washing stations. Next slide, please. So coming back to the role of parents during the pandemic, what we did with parents was we oriented parents to help their children to cope, and we also provided learning. We helped the parents to support their kids with learning materials and send them their kids to school. And we also oriented parents to support the school's COVID-19 protocol compliance, because the government legislated that schools cannot be opened unless they meet the COVID-19 protocol, and the parents had to support the schools. So the parents were providing homemade face masks for their children because that was mandatory, and parents were constructing temporary classrooms to create enough space for the children and creating access to hand washing facilities. And parents were also helping by bringing adequate water supply for the schools and assisting the school community in maintaining the school sanitation. And beyond that, we continued the radio program, and we continued orienting parents so that they can follow up their children's curriculum. And we made the parents continuing to monitor their kids' learning after the pandemic being the new normal. Next slide, please. So as Imagine One Day, we believe that now more than ever, parents play a central role in their children's education and must be supported. Thank you.
Thank you, Saeed. I think it's very important that you pointed out that even parents who are illiterate have an important role to play in ensuring their children's education, and that they can bridge that gap, as well as the continued role. So one of the things that I think we're seeing as each one of our partners talks to us about the various strategies that they've employed is that while they're focusing on a certain area, the role of distance education, of communities, of parents, that these are not standalone and that each one is intertwined. With that, I would like to invite Sitanand from UWS to join us, because the one thing that we have not yet talked about is the role of the teachers themselves in ensuring that children continue to learn during school closures, and how teachers, parents, and communities all can work together to do this. And Sita will touch on all of those aspects. Sita, if you wouldn't mind turning your video on and going ahead and talking to us about the work of UWS. I know Sita was having some connection issues before. Are you there? Good. You are on mute, so go ahead and you will have to unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you, Sabrina. My name is Sita. I'm the UWS Cambodia director. Thank you to AAC Foundation that create this event discussion. I have such a great honor to join the panel. Okay, UWS, United World School, was established in 2008, and we are the registered UK charity, and we have a mission to improve through education, life opportunity for some of the world poorest children living in the remote area and marginalized community. And we are currently working in 3 countries, Cambodia, Nepal, and Myanmar. And we are working in a partnership with the local government, with the local community, and especially when we are working in partnership with our major donor EACs. By working together, we are enabled to build and operate 117 schools with the enrollment of 15,000 our school children in the primary school education in remote location in Ratanakiri, Mandalgiri, Stang Trang, Kokong, and Karachi province. And our ambition is to bring education to as many children into remote area as possible by building and running a school in local education where there's no school. And our school model, we are building schools, so we include the community involvement, like the community, they join us for the labor, and they have the land that donate to the project, and they can build a school together. When we build a school, we build the school together. So there's a big involvement from the community. Next slide, please. So here's our redefining how teaching and learning happens in response to the pandemic. So my slides topic is focused on teachers, but I'll go through in order with different sectors. So here the distance and education in low digital areas. So we provide students with worksheets, reading books for the student learning at home. We create a special outdoor activity like art, song, storytelling. So these activities are taught by our community teachers and libraries. So we focus on physical activity. It's like exercise and alternative learning. So this is important for physical and mental health. So as you can see the pictures, the students put their hands up, and sometimes they put the hand left, right, and move their body. So we want to make sure that their physical is in a good in a good health. And you can see also the picture with the our kids, our children are drawing. They're working on art. So this is our activity in the distant education in no low digital areas. Can you, next slide, please? So here's our role of community. So in every of our school, we have the school support committee, and they work closely with the United World School team on the COVID-19 awareness, parenting, and well-being. So the committee have to understand and what is COVID is, how dangerous it is, and the parenting well-being. They have to understand like that they have to work together with the community that have to so make sure the parent not like use the violence or hurt the children's, and also focus on child protection policies with the community. And community also careful control the new stranger that want to enter to the village, to make sure the strangers or the new people who are outside the village, they are clean. So they check by our community. And our community also play an important role to coordinate with community and school to make sure the student enroll in progress. So we have the community which observe and follow the teachers or the students' enrollment. And our community also encourage and motivate every student to be able to go to school as much as we can. So they focus on every student who are out, especially older girl. They are more like high percent of our at-risk student. So our community focus on that. And with good news, with our new EAC grant is going toward identify at-risk students in the community and preventing them from drop out of school. Next slide, please. So here's the role of parents. The parents in our community, they work together, they join together with our United World School team to maintain the habit of children going to school. Before the COVID, we have created a really good habit of children being in school, and they are in school. In the morning, they get up, they sit down in front of their open fire, and they have breakfast. And then they get the bag with full of resources, and then they walk to school, and then they have a happy learning in school. And because of this pandemic, so it cut off this good habit. So our parents now are working really together with our team to maintain this habit. So make sure we keep as much high enrollment as we can. And parents also ensure that at-risk children, they are supported with the help from the EAC grant. So we will work with together, United World School and parent will focus on the at-risk students. Parents also join the parenting and well-being training and COVID-19 awareness with the United World School team. So they have to be aware that what is the COVID is and how dangerous it is, and parents should behave well with children, not like using violence or other hurt to the children. And parents also have the school activity, like they come to upgrade the wash facility in the school that we have to make them available for the student and communities. So we want our children to be clean. And of course, the parents observe children learning at home as well. I mean, even they, most of them are illiterate, but they at least they know that children are working on on the exercise or art. And of course, they also focus on hygiene. So very important to keep the hand clean and to keep their whole physical body clean. Next slide, please. So here's the role of our teachers. So our teachers provide a good safe outdoor lesson by using interactive learning with fun activity. Our teachers set a task for students to work at home. So our teachers give like a workbook, like a worksheet that the student can do mathematics or art, or they can coloring or reading book that the student can read. And our teacher focus really carefully on attendance and well-being, especially for at-risk student and adolescent girl. So teachers really follow the student track, like where they are, and because the community is a small community, the teachers know where the children are. So sometimes he walk to the farm and follow the task that he set for the children. And he also focused carefully on the health and COVID awareness campaigns that he made with the community. So make sure he joining together with the community, that the campaign of the COVID has been spread to the entire community, that the community aware the dangers of COVID. And the teacher of course focus on also the hygiene and the child protection and inclusive, so to make sure the child protection, everyone understand about child protection, and everyone in the school, equally boys and girls. So these are our activities that we respond to the pandemic, and we can do this because of, as I mentioned earlier, because of the partnership together, especially with our major partner, EAC, enable us to do this, to respond to this difficult time. So let's do it together to get more out of school, children into school. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Sita. Very, very important that you pointed out on how teachers' interactions with communities, with the distance learning, with parents, and then their specific tasks really go to jointly contribute to ensuring that children continue to learn. So from here, what we're going to do is we're going to come into some discussion and dig deeper into some of these areas. So I'd like to ask all of our panelists to go ahead and turn their videos and mics on. And as an audience members, if you have questions for the panelists, go ahead and post those in the chat box, and we will try and also address some of your questions as we go forward in the next about 20 minutes. We have about 20 minutes left. So thank you all. One of the first questions I have, and this is really kind of for everyone, is around the idea that, as schools closed, most of the world really started pushing towards these high-tech solutions, online, internet-based learning options. And we know that even in high-income countries, there were large portions of children who didn't have access or were unable to access this. So we only saw, a greater divide between those who were able to access education and those who were not. As we look for solutions and strategies to ensure that the children that we're identifying to bring into school, who were out of school originally, who really are facing these challenges, are brought into school and are learning, how can we, as practitioners and implementers, try to ensure that we are not creating greater inequalities in the communities and for the children that we're serving? And I will let the first one of you who kind of points that he or she wants to answer.
Perhaps I can start. As I mentioned before, this was a very unique moment. This is something the world, at least in our lifetime, we haven't seen such a crisis coming. hence, we believe that the practitioners, and I'm very pleased to be among this group of people right now, is that we could never take it as a business opportunity. We could not see, oh, maybe this is the best time I can sell this tool or that technology. It was being human-centered. It was just like how you're trying to save people from fire. How can you make sure that these kids are not left out? And somehow you have to reach them. If I can afford internet, fine. If I cannot, that does not make me stop there. I have to be exploring the ways and means how we can do it. So I think this whole notion of being human-centered and do the doable, and don't quit. And this is how we could make our way. And that was the only way for us to somehow play our part in widening this digital divide. We would not say that we have completely resolved it or addressed it, but I think everybody, if they do their part, they do the doable, there is a hope that, we can address the challenges such as. Thank you.
Just to add a few things. I think even for communities that have adequate technology, we haven't seen adequate learning for the kids, because I think the parents were not really prepared on taking over the teaching role. Even though parents are the first teachers, for their kids for some years, then they transfer their kids to the formal school. And I think they left all those responsibility on to teachers and schools. And our schools have not been engaging parents, even though they had to, because kids learn from home and school and their environment, not only from schools. But I think the traditional way of educating kids has been becoming more of like school-based, and parents were, in my view, were left out, and they were not contributing to the level of contribution that they could make. So I would say, to avoid this inequality even going forward, not only like for literate society, but even for literate parents, I think engaging parents to a larger extent will help to cope up with such pandemic, because we have seen many research indicating that even parents who were educated, highly educated, were unable to help their kids at home, tutoring them at home, because they didn't experience that. So I think strengthening, supporting the parents, even outside the pandemic, is so important.
I wanted to quickly agree with what my colleagues have said, and it's so important for the parents, and then also the rest of the community, even if they aren't currently parents, to ensure that they are on board with the education. And that's why it's so important for us to have all of the community members build the school. And I wanted to share our mission and why we chose some of the words. So our mission is breaking the cycle of poverty, illiteracy, and low expectations through service and education. And one of the most important things, for right now, is the piece about low expectations. And I think a lot of times there is a low expectation of community members, especially those who are economically poor or people who are illiterate. And education definitely starts at home. And we know that women in particular make a lot of decisions about children, and they support children in school. And women are more likely to be illiterate in our partner communities than men. And so it is extremely important to ensure that they are on board, that they're helping to build their school, that they're helping with their children's education, and also to strengthen their capacity to problem solve and to become literate also. So I showed you the picture, I don't know if you remember from that picture, but where they were signing the covenant, the woman and the man in that picture, they were signing with their fingerprint. And so there definitely needs to be a change And I'm sure my colleagues are doing things to work to ensure that parents are literate too. And even if they aren't, they can understand the importance of education and have just as much capacity, and maybe in some cases even more, to help and support their children.
Can I add something as well? Okay. I think we need everyone to involve, like the teacher, the community, the government, and us, our different stakeholders, to focus on especially the our marginalized area. And they should have some kind of like outdoor learning more, because the children love it. So in our project here, when we have like a storytelling under the trees, and we have it's like singing, and I think we especially the government, we should establish like a special program for this to support our children, and rather than just waiting when sometimes we hear a lot when the people say, oh, when the school is open, when the pandemic is over. So we should have like a real program to adapt it. Especially like, inside the classroom, we are limited with children, and we should have some kind of program like the outdoor learning, like pull a lot of reading book, things like that.
Thank you so much. I think this is really important and continues to reflect and bring on how important the involvement of each one of these members of what I'm going to call the education system, not just the school system, is. The community, the parents, the teachers, the educators, all of it. So as educated child partners, each one of your organizations and each one of your projects is really focused on identifying and enrolling high numbers of out-of-school children, but those who are really the most marginalized, the hardest to reach, the ones who we like to call it the high-hanging fruit. We've reached the ones that are low and easy to get. They're already in school, but we're trying to find those who are out of school still and are facing extraordinary barriers to education. And this was already your mission prior to the pandemic and school closures. How has the work that you were previously doing or already doing, that was already in play, helped, if at all, you come up with these strategies or to adapt to what is the reality of the current situation in the past year and the challenges facing the pandemic and school closures? Go ahead, Tariq.
Okay. Well, I mean, the program we were implementing in Pakistan was very broad-based. So we were literally covering the 50% of country's geography, working in 55 districts with a big number of force, the teachers, the community mobilizers, the school and village education committee members, other volunteers. So I think having that network on the ground, the most amazing thing that happened with this pandemic was that we realized that we cannot live with this hierarchy. We have to make every person who is involved in implementing this program should become now education emergency responder. And I think this was the best thing we could do, having the privilege of a robust network on the ground, and then turning everybody into one thing, and that is make sure you reach to the child, you reach to their parents, and make sure that they are listening to their lessons through radio.
Thanks, Tariq. It looks like Roseanne has her mic off. Do you want to jump in there? Go ahead.
That makes me think about something that I hadn't thought of before. And, I think it's extremely important that your team and your staff are extremely bought into your methodology and your mission, and they are really flexible as well, because we had the same situation. Well, I don't know if it's the same, but we had a situation where some of our programs had to stop. We have another program where we bring our donors to our communities, and obviously people aren't traveling, and it was really important for us to be able to redeploy those folks who are dedicated to Build On. They understand our methodology, they believe in the mission and what we're doing, and to be able to get them out into the field to help bring back people to school, to help tell the stories of the children who are going back to school, so that we can continue to engage our donor base, because that has been a little bit of a challenge, because we typically have 1,000 people who go to visit our communities, and they weren't able to do that. So having a core committed team that you're working with and keeping those people over a long period of time has really been important to us. And we're extremely grateful for all of our teams across the 8 different countries for their commitment and for their flexibility, and the high expectations that they have that children will continue to be brought back to school even during this really difficult time.
Okay.
That's right.
To add a few things, yeah. For Imagine One Day, currently we have one active project with EAC. This project was started in September, actually in the middle of the COVID-19. But the good thing with that project was, in the project we had, community engagement component, like community outreach activities, and we have a platform called Coffee Conversation. These activities were mainly to engage the communities in a conversation. So the project came at the right time, and we had that platform to have a dialogue with the community on how we can help, identify and enroll out of school children. So that helped us to really identify 8,000 out of school children and enroll them in 2020. So having activities related to community engagement and creating a platform where influential community leaders like religious leaders, PTAs, women associations are coming together, of course, within the COVID context, maintaining the distance and everything, to then create the strategies of how to help identify and enroll these children, and how to create a safe school, for kids to be enrolled. It was so helpful for us.
I think for all the activity that responds to the pandemic is challenged. Like we need teachers to work in every student's house, or our teachers going into different houses. It's difficult. It's not easy. And then when we gather the children back to school, and everyone afraid of each other, they start to be away. And then when we put them in classroom, our classroom have to be not like before. For example, before we fill children with 40, but now we have to make the distance in the classroom. So it could be only 20 children. So lack of classroom is also a challenge.
I think it's really important, and some of what you've just pointed out, using the networks and that role of making sure the community is engaged, that you were all already doing prior to pandemic, or even, Saeed, I think what's very interesting and encouraging to me is that while children were forced out of school around the world, Imagine One Day was actually able to identify and enroll children in the middle of the pandemic while schools were closed, and get them into education because of the strategies that you used and had in place for this. That's very, very encouraging, because it does mean that just because the school building itself is closed, learning doesn't have to stop. And I think each one of you has really helped point that out. One of the other things I would really like us to look at is how do you see, because of this new role that communities have started to play, that parents have increasingly played? You say you said that parents are the first teachers of their children, but then when the kids or children go into schools, they kind of, oftentimes we see a backing off and just handing that responsibility over to the school system, the teachers, the educators within the four walls of that school building. How do you see the education system and education provision being redefined due to the pandemic responses and as we go forward? Go ahead, Saeed.
Yeah, I think we have gained a very good learning from this pandemic. In my view, our education system needs to reflect the local context, and our education system should also capitalize on local knowledge. Let me give you a very simple example. When I grew up, my parents used to tell us stories and teach us maths and everything, on the way to the farm or on the way to the market, whatever. You can now see that tradition is deteriorating. So which means parents are 100% relying on the schools to give these skills to their children. But in my view, I think we need to reevaluate, rethink about what role the parents could play, the community could play in terms of educating and helping their kids learn. Like what Nan said earlier, we can invite elders to the school, and ask them to tell a story to the children, story that relates to the community, that is, known to the community, which that will help to strengthen the bondage between the school and the community, and it will help the kids to grow with the norm and tradition of their communities as well. So I think, education policy makers need to reconsider, the role of local knowledge in our education curricula.
I think the parents should, as I said earlier, they should maintain the habit of children going to school, and they should work closely with the teacher and the school support committee. I think every little the children, even they get, learning. The parents are, most of them are illiterate. They don't understand. They can't read, they can write, but they have to work together with the school support committee and with the teachers and maintain the habit and make sure they can discuss create something fun. And so they should have a close relationship with community and teacher.
Thank you. I'll tell you, I think that's one thing that we often overlook, is that local indigenous knowledge really does have a role to play, and it's a primary starting point and should not be overlooked. We should really be building off of it in our education of our children and the education system. Rodan, Tariq, if you have anything else to add on this, the redefining of the education system per se, and what's involved in it and the roles of these different actors and players going forward, and how education may happen. What's the vision of it?
Well, I will just add that it is essential, and if it's essential and it's critical. If I think about especially the rural communities where many of us are working, the education system is decentralized. our partner governments do not have all of the resources to reach out. And even Sabrina, you talked about the divide even in higher income countries, that the role, it doesn't matter how much resources you have, we really need strong people in the community advocating and supporting the students' learning. And the same thing is true for the communities where we're working. So I think the continued capacity building, the continued real genuine partnership with community members, and also in the local offices, the Ministry of Education, and not just having those partnerships and on the national level, because it's those local people who can really help to make the difference, whether it's sending a new teacher or supporting a community when the teacher isn't committed or something like that. But we really need to strengthen those connections between our community members and the local Ministry of Education so that they can get the support and they feel like they're in a position to advocate for that support. And one of the things that really worked out well for us, both before the pandemic and now, is having that group, the leadership committee of men and women who not only help to build a school, but they also continue to ensure that the education is happening in the community. And they will, for example, we've had women support girls who are in school and who are young mothers, and they will take turns going and watching their children on the school so that they could do that. We have also had our leadership committees will draw attention if something isn't going well in the school or someone isn't committed. In Senegal, for example, if there is something missing in our rural community schools, which there often are, they don't have as many resources. We've had women who have made soap and sold soap in order to support the school. And that has been really important during the pandemic because we all know the importance of hygiene and hand washing. And again, very basic, simple technology, not even technology, but hand washing. And so you never know where you will work with the communities and they are elevated to be the leaders where that will come back. And that example of the women, first they just started selling soap to make money because the kids had no papers and pencils in the schools in Senegal. And then they would help with the hygiene. And that became extremely important during the pandemic because they increased that project even more so that kids could be in school socially distant, but have the focus on hygiene and hand washing. And these are low tech solutions. We're not talking about fancy wash systems because that isn't going to happen right now in many of our communities. But to me, it's so cool that the women in Senegal are making the soap and they're making the money from it and sending that back to support the children in school. So it's really crucial. And it's the organizations that have been fortifying the communities all along and putting them at the center. I think that can make the real difference here. And so for that reason, I'm really honored to be amongst this group because the gentlemen here are really, really focused in the same way that Build On is.
I think you're right. And I think, Roseanne, thank you, because you just brought us back to a point that you've made earlier and one that you made previously in discussions that we've had before on the breaking of the low expectations around communities and really not thinking that communities are incapable or don't have agency or can't do it, but actually holding them to having high expectations. Tarek, did you want to jump in on this question? And then I think we have one question from the audience as well.
Well, I think my colleagues have said it all. Perhaps one little thing is that pandemic would also perhaps have the policymakers to think about reform agenda. I mean, gradually the education has become a commodity, whereas it has to be a fundamental human right. And I think that is where the government should look into it, because otherwise many nations would go even further behind in the progress if they do not really make it as a fundamental human right and state responsibility to ensure that every child has education.
You know what, I think that's a perfect segue to our question from the audience member. So we have James Shaw Hamilton asks, how well do donors understand and that each respective project is complex and nuanced and might not fit well within overall rigid processes. That's sorry. And so I guess this is donors in general, but I'm going to broaden his question and bring it to say, how well do policymakers understand that education is for the most marginalized and is, to make it not a commodity is nuanced and needs to be flexible and so that it's not over rigid. And I'll just let any one of you that wants to jump in there.
I can start. I talked a little bit about how we're engaging our donors during this process because, when I think about like how well do donors understand that things we have to be flexible with our program, and for us, I think the burden is on us to make them understand and to bring them along so that they understand when things need to change or when things are late or when there aren't as many people in school right away, and to ensure that you are explaining to your donors what your plan is in the future and how that is going to be changed. And we have that, and that's the thing that we have done with our whole team. We have a whole team that basically they steward our donors when they come and visit and break ground on a school, when they're working in solidarity with the community, and they're not able to do that now and build those connections and the understanding. And so we have redeployed that team to do some digital ground breaks and to ensure that the donors understand what's happening. If we are late with the construction of the school because of materials shortage due to COVID, or something is more expensive because of COVID. We haven't touched on any of those things in this, but it's just important that you are communicating and bringing the donors along as if they are partners on your project and not necessarily just funding your project, and ensuring that you do that. And that's been really important to us because we definitely need to build more schools. Someone talked about that's now only 25 children can be inside of us in some of the schools. And so the need for classrooms is even more immense now. And that might change the expectation going forward with the number of children in schools. So I think just bringing them along, I think would be my answer to that.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more person to jump in on this as we're running close to our time. Yes, please.
For us, UWS, we inform our donor with our different program to respond with the COVID, and also we have we keep regularly sending them information, picture, video in their schools and in their project, and also we have the monitoring systems. So we monitor on the enrollment, sometimes high, sometimes down, and we tell the relatives. Sometimes some community are affected with the economy and people move out the village, and we got a low enrollment, so they have to understand that. So this is how we do.
Thank you so much. So before we wrap, and I invite our executive director to come on and wrap this up with some closing remarks, I would like just quickly to ask each one of you one sentence, or as close to one sentence as you can get. What is the one lesson learned from the past year that we can take forward as we are working to ensure that education is a fundamental human right for all children and that all children are able to access that right?
Well, maybe I can say, I think my learning is that what may come, there is no excuse to let kids be deprived of learning. I mean, if the conventional system is not working, if the formal education delivery is suspended, learning must continue, and you will be amazed when you do your part of effort, and then you see the parents are very eager to join you, and so the community. And I think our social capital has been really the most important thing to bank upon during these times?
I think for our lesson learned is the children got like a habit of like a lot of self-learning. So they learn a lot of themselves without fully teachers' support. I think they more independent. I think this is good. And the other lesson learned is also the hygiene. Our community, they live in the dirt, in the dirt. And since we're making for wash facility and we inform them, you have to keep your hands clean, and now they are more clean. They become healthy. So we should continue and to watch follow with this hygiene and hand washing regularly. So on. Yeah.
I think for me, we shouldn't undermine the role of parents in supporting their children's education. And I think the biggest lesson this pandemic gave us also is that we had to educate the parents themselves through adult functional literacy programs. It could be like integrated functional adult literacy programs where they learn about their livelihood, but at the same time they become, numerate, they gain like numeracy and literacy skills. That will help us to cope up with such, catastrophe. And so I really encourage policymakers that education is also the right. The adults have the right to education, like children, and we need to invest on them and support parents to be a part and support the education system. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I would emphasize that even children or even parents who are illiterate have their roles that they can play in supporting, encouraging, and reminding their children to continue their education, to follow up, make sure that they are doing their lessons, et cetera, even if they can't read themselves. Roseanne, did you want to jump in? Yes.
Yeah, I know we're almost out of time, but just to say I agree with what everyone has said, but also want to add that it's extremely important, I think, to be disciplined. You have to find the balance between disciplined in your approach in doing what you do well, but also being flexible and being able to pivot when needs be. So you have to have this balance between being disciplined and then also this flexibility, and it will look like different things, sometimes in different communities, in different countries. And for us, it has looked different at different times, and even in the same communities in the same countries. So that's been a really important lesson.
I think that's extremely important to keep in mind as we go forward. And with that, I'm going to invite our executive director, the executive director of Educate a Child, to join us on camera and on the mic to wrap us up, pull this all together with her thoughts and reflections on what we've heard today. Mary.
Thank you. Thank you, Sabrina, and thanks again to our colleagues for sharing some of their knowledge and experience with us today. It's such a pleasure to have you as partners, really. Last year, we learned the ever-growing importance of leveraging our experience, the past experience. And for me, as I think about what you said today, I think there are 5 key points that I would take away from my perspective. First, we have seen that those who were already focusing on helping children overcome the barriers to education were able to use their own creativity and existing strategies that they had been employing to reach marginalized children. The crisis really forced just greater focus to help get children into learning. Secondly, I think that the experience of EAC's partners and many others over this past year has made it clear that the assumption that education stops when the school closes is absolutely false. Education does and must take place beyond the 4 walls of the classroom. Our first educators are our parents and our families and communities. In fact, parents have a vital role to play in their children's education. They do not have to be well educated or even literate to support children. Education is everybody's responsibility. Schools are just a part of education. In this slide, there's a need to redefine education systems, and this is my third point, from what takes place in and around the school building to include schools, teachers, parents, community leaders, policymakers, all as co-facilitators in the learning of children. Teachers need to be trained to engage and work with parents, communities, and local knowledge and experience. We've seen that where this was already taking place, community support to children as the schools closed was absolutely critical. We also know that teachers need to be trained to help children learn on their own. And this becomes increasingly important with dependence on the internet. And that takes me then to the fourth point, which is distance education is not defined by the internet, at least not for more than half of the world's children. Much of the world immediately shifted to online learning as a way to deal with classrooms and learning. However, this was not a solution for much of the world's children, probably the majority. And even teachers from wealthy nations were ill-prepared to trained to make this shift. Our partners' responses to the need for distance education in less advantaged communities has shown us that radio is not obsolete. Pencils and paper are a great technology, can be just as powerful as laptops or tablets. What's important is understanding the context and which technology makes sense when. Finally, my fifth point is, I think from today, that COVID has laid bare what some ignored, what some suspected, and what some of us already knew. And it's this: today's conventional education systems are not capable of teaching all learners. They just can't do it. One size does not fit all. COVID must be seen by us as a wake-up call to the world's view and response to education. Back to school must be seen as something more flexible with greater learning opportunities for children so they can learn where it's physically possible, an appropriate level, and with the tools and technologies available to them. So let's not waste any more time. We've seen the innovation. We know what's possible. We know what has to be done from a technical perspective. You've all talked about it. What remains then is the political will and the resources to educate each and every child. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. And with that, I want to thank each and every one of our partners, those of you who have joined us today to present your work, but also those who maybe are in the audience and who are working diligently and hard in the field to ensure that each and every child remains in the classroom, and those who don't have access are able to gain access and realize their right to an education. Thank you all for joining us. And with that, have a lovely day or evening, wherever you are. Again, thank you.
Thank you.